This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for joining the Oregon State Board of Agriculture meeting this morning. It is Wednesday, September 23rd, and I am Stephanie Halleck. I am chair of the board. The board's vice chair is here today as well, Brian Harper. And I will now call the meeting to order, and I'll begin by asking the board's ODA assistant, Carla Valnes, to walk through some housekeeping for us as we do this video meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'd like to remind everyone to please mute your phones or your computer audio during the call to prevent unnecessary background noise during the meeting. If you are joining the call by video conference, we'd like to ask that only board members and presenters turn their camera on during the call. If your web camera is off, you will be able to see any presentations or documents that are shared during the meeting. If you are joining the call by conference call only, pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at oda.direct/board-agriculture, or any additional items that are shared today will be posted after the meeting. And just a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. Thank you.
Okay, and Carla, would you please call the roll for the board members to introduce themselves, and I will start. I'm Stephanie Halleck. As I said, I'm the board chair, and I am a public member from the metropolitan Portland area.
Barbara Boyer.
Present.
Want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I was unmuted. Present. Can you see me?
Harper.
Oh, sorry.
Brian Harper, member, Farmer, Junction City.
Anthony Johnson.
Member, Farmer, Corbett.
Grant Kitamura, Onion Packer, Ontario.
Marty Myers.
Marty Myers, Boardman, Oregon, farmer.
Tyson Raymond.
Tyson Raymond, very, very dry land, wheat farmer, Eastern Oregon.
Luisa Santa Maria.
Luisa Santa Maria, public member, Oregon State Extension.
Director Taylor.
Hi, Alexa Taylor, Director, ODA.
Dean Sams.
Yeah, Alan Sams, Dean of the College of Ag Sciences at OSU, ex officio.
Again, good morning, and we'd like to ask everyone to mute their phones during the call to control the background noise. It looks like we have 27 participants on the call this morning. We'd also like to ask, if you are joining us through the video meeting this morning, if you would please enter your name and organization in the chat box. We'll use that as our sign-in sheet this morning. Just briefly, do we have anyone that's joining us just by phone only? If so, would you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself? Okay, I think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you, Carla. And I just would make note that public comment is scheduled for 10 a.m. We originally had 4 people signed up to speak. I believe one of them has a conflict and will not be speaking. And I want to remind everybody, of course, that the meeting is being recorded, and I just violated my own premise. This is Stephanie Halleck, the board chair. So please state your name for the record before you begin your comments. And I would start the meeting with an approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion?
Barbara Boyer, I so move.
Tyson Raymond, second.
Thank you. So the approval has been made by Barbara Boyer and seconded by Tyson Raymond. Is there any discussion of the minutes? All right, be sure everybody's got their mic on, like Brian and Marty. Turn on your mics or give a thumbs up. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. So we'll move right into the director's report, and then from that, Director Taylor, I assume maybe you'll just go right into the Oregon wildfire update.
Absolutely. Thank you. For the record, Alexis Taylor, Director ODA. Thank you, Chair Halleck. It's good to see everyone, even if it's still virtual. I look forward to the day that we can all get together again in person, but we're not quite there yet. So I have a couple things I want to flag, and then I'll just spend most of my time talking about ODA's wildfire response, because a lot of people don't know that we are an active part of the state's response through these devastating wildfires that we've experienced through the month of September. First, we also, this week is Ledge Days, and we had been before the Senate Environment, Natural Resources and Environment Committee on Monday and House Ag and Land Use yesterday. We were asked to talk about two insecticide ongoing processes, one around our rulemaking around chlorpyrifos, and one around the EPA review of certain types of neonicotinoids. Lisa Hansen and Stephanie Page led those presentations. The one thing I wanted to flag, you would have seen where we had announced our chlorpyrifos rulemaking that some of you may recall that Pete Brantano, when he was still a board member, had served on as well, kind of as that Board of Ag representative. We have a proposed rule out currently. It was supposed to close comment, I think, on the 1st of October. Because of the ongoing wildfires and many in our ag community impacted and have many other things going on right now as they are actively, many of them, fighting the fires or helping their neighbors through recovery. We decided to delay or extend that comment period as well as a few others. And the chlorpyrifos rulemaking now closes on October 22nd. I would say we still are hopeful and plan to finalize that by the end of the year. But some of that is going to be dependent on, the number of comments, the content, and any adjustments that might be made based upon those comments. I also wanted to flag that ODA, since we last met in early August, mid-August, submitted our hemp plan, our state hemp plan to USDA. They had came back. They had a few additional questions that they wanted to clarify, and so we've submitted that information that they were requesting. They were requesting all of our rules. We had already shared with them that once before, but they wanted it again as some part of our formal submission, and then wanted just a certification on the level of resources that we have to actually run a hemp enforcement program. So we have done that, and now we are waiting for that final word or any additional comments from USDA. I hope everyone saw this as kind of long, excited news that ODA launched their new brand. I believe we sent you that email. We're pretty excited about it. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback that it looks fresh, it looks modern, that people feel in the ag sector connected to it, that it represents many different parts of our agriculture sector. And so that is out there. Obviously, we are going to spend a lot of today talking about the budget and what impacts we've seen because of the COVID and economic downturn on our budget and the state's budget. So we're really rolling it out in trying to be very thoughtful about the budget impact. So we have only rolled it out on kind of really low or no cost. So updating our digital footprint. We are not reprinting kind of anything, letterhead, brochures. We're going to use all of that physical paper first before we start printing with the new logo, those types of things. But so far, really positive reaction to it. We're really excited about it. And I hope you all had a chance to see it, and also thank the board because many of you kind of answered those questions that we had sent. We had hired a firm to help us with this, and thank you for you taking your time because that was really impactful. Last time, I believe I talked a little bit about the food security and farm worker safety program that we had quickly stood up in response to COVID-19. And this was in response to some Oregon OSHA rules to try and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 within our farm worker community. That program is still open. It is, I believe, open until the end of October 25th, I believe, if I'm remembering that date correctly. And that is because that's when the rules the Oregon OSHA rules expire. I mention this just because as you're talking to people in your networks, just please remind them that this is still open to apply. You know, these resources were dedicated by the governor and the legislature to really help our ag community be able to navigate pretty unprecedented times for all of us, and some of the additional cost impacts on our ag community to try and mitigate for our farm worker community. So one of the changes that we made to that program since I last briefed you on this, and since we got together in June, is we expanded it to include face coverings, reimbursement for face covering. So initially that was not covered when we stood this program up in, I don't know, early in May. But obviously as the summer has gone on, the science and the requirements and guidelines around face coverings have changed pretty dramatically. And so we have expanded that program to be able to reimburse for face covering. So that's something new, and I think something every single producer can probably capitalize on in this state. On the topic of face coverings, I just want to say also another thank you and shout out to OSU and OSU Extension. Last week, with all of the smoke, we were hearing a lot of concerns from our agriculture community as they were trying to navigate worker safety and some harvest that was ongoing. And so the state dedicated another, all told, it's been over 2 shipments, 200,000 masks to the agriculture and farm worker community. And OSU, I called them on a Sunday, and they were pivoted to all in on Sunday trying to set this up and get the masks distributed. And they've just been such an awesome, amazing partner. And we couldn't be getting these masks out to our ag community if it wasn't for your team, Dean Sam. So thank you so much. It's been an awesome partnership, and we really appreciate it. And then before I jump to wildfires, I just wanted to update on the 2 Board of Ag positions. So Pete and Sharon last meeting were at our last meeting in June. We had been working through a process to get 2 new recommendations for the governor to consider. As obviously they are not here, through kind of the past couple weeks with the unprecedented wildfires, obviously the governor has been pretty singularly focused on that. And we were just ran up against the time crunch and time constraint with all of the kind of her really emergency management with all of these wildfires. So we are a little delayed, but I fully expect we will have 2 new board members join us at the December meeting. Likewise, Louisa's first term technically ended. I had asked her to extend that first term to continue to serve. And so she is here doing that at my request. So thank you, Louisa. And likewise, we hope to have Louisa confirm or reappointed for the December board meeting as well to start her second term. So I might pause.
Before you move on to wildfires, I just want to check and see if anybody has any questions on any of the material the director has presented so far, and also to remind people who are not speaking or asking questions to please mute your mics. Any questions for the director? Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, so last time I gave you a pretty big update about one emergency and crisis, our public health crisis around COVID and how ODA had been responding. And unfortunately, today I can give you another update about a different crisis. Not that any of us needed another emergency in 2020. So first, I just want to say, I'm sure all of you have heard the pretty amazing stories from people in the ag community banding together, where they fought to save their farms, their neighbors, and in some instances, their whole communities. It's been really amazing to see our agricultural community pull together. And likewise, we have seen individuals and businesses who maybe not directly impacted by the fires, but really stepping up to provide whatever has been needed, whether it's feed and supplies, whether it is land for displaced livestock, or just volunteering their time. The outpouring of support has been truly amazing. I'm sure many of you have been impacted. I know all of us were impacted by the smoke there for about a week and a half, all the way even to Grantover in Ontario. That smoke made it all the way to the West Coast, or excuse me, the East Coast. So it really was pretty remarkable to see just the impact that these fires have had, not just on us here in Oregon or the West Coast. And even some of our own staff here at ODA had to evacuate, and they've had to rely on family and friends and their communities for help. So we certainly feel that impact of these wildfires personally at ODA. And so while ODA is obviously not on the front lines like our heroic firefighters and first responders, it really has been all hands on deck for us since September 8th. It's kind of amazing to think back to Labor Day on the 7th, that Monday. And yes, we knew the fires were going on, but it was kind of not on our radar the way it was come the morning of the 8th, I think, for many people in the state. As counties began evacuating people as part of their county emergency plans, the counties began setting up animal emergency shelters as well. ODA leads the effort in the state to coordinate support for its agriculture and animal agriculture. And so that support for animals and livestock during any emergency. And so we quickly mobilized the team within ODA to ensure those counties really had the support they needed. We began contacting the animal shelters every day, and we're actually continuing that contact with those animal shelters just to assess the type of animals arriving, the number, the needs of those animals, whether it was feed needs, other supplies like water buckets, veterinarian needs, etc. We put a call out through the Oregon Veterinarian Emergency Response Team, or OVERT. Some of the board members may recall that we actually mobilized an OVERT team led by one of our regional vets, Dr. Ryan Scholes, down to Paradise in support of the campfire and treatment and reunification of animals down there in California. Was that last year? I'm blanking on time. And so that's that OVERT team of veterinarians and vet techs that we had tapped into. So we tapped into that resource here as well. We also worked with the Oregon Veterinary Medical Association, OVMA, as well, to really develop a roster of vets across the state who are willing to assist at these animal shelters. Some developed a roster of care where veterinarians were doing rotations. Some just developed on call as needed, but really making sure that animals who had to be evacuated, and that ranges from dogs and cats to a tortoise to a few emus to goats and sheep and chickens and cows and a lot of horses. I knew we had a lot of horses in Oregon. I was not quite, didn't understand how many, I think. Number one, probably species of animals at every single animal shelter were horses. We also deployed staff who had animal ag experience to support the animal shelters where that was needed and identified by the counties. I think one of the things we found is a ton of people wanted to volunteer and help, again, wanting to contribute and do something, but really that knowledge of handling particularly large animals was a challenge to find. So we helped share some expertise with our staff when we had it. Also, when I talk about veterinarians, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this. OSU also had many of their veterinarians and working at some of these shelters as well. So another place that OSU has been a great partner. So in addition to really that immediate animal shelter support, and I will say we went from Monday, having no emergency animal shelters in the state to within a few hours having dozens stood up, and all told, we've been supporting about 27 shelters, animal shelters throughout the state over the past kind of 2.5 weeks. But in addition to that immediate need that we were working on, we began really planning for that longer term needs. USDA, we requested and they mobilized a team and what they call an incident management team to really support the work that we're doing here. We're extremely grateful for them because they are really helping. They have some expertise in emergency management and really can focus on this full time. What we're seeing is, what we've seen kind of starting last weekend through this week is a lot of animals are starting to go home, which is great. We are seeing some needs and we're quickly filling those as people are moving those animals and livestock home. Is a lot of feed needs. Their barns may have burnt, their feed may have burnt, maybe their pasture may have burnt. And so we're working with that USDA team to get feed into the zones where they're taking their animals back to, or some livestock maybe weren't evacuated, but there's still some resource needs there. And so we're also working to get that in to those areas as we work with the local law enforcement who are really placing those requests to us. OSU has also been really taking the lead on some donations around feed needs. And so they have been coordinating that effort and really filtered into the state system, which has been a huge help, as well as many in our ag community have stepped up and said, we've got hay, we've got feed, we've got pasture, what do you need to try and help some of those impacted by the wildfires. One other thing I wanted to flag is there was a concern, and I think a very valid concern, as some people had to flee and evacuate very quickly. There wasn't time to maybe always take their livestock, and some livestock or animals were coming into the shelters with unknown ownership. So our IT team worked actually through the weekend to develop an animal tracker, which is live online, where organizations, these emergency animal shelters, our staff can upload animals that we don't know who the owners are, as one additional tool. So as people are saying, I lost my cat, there is a process through many county emergency shelters to already kind of do that matchmaking. We're not trying to replace this. This is an additional service. So it's able to take livestock, it's able to take horses, but also some of those domestic pets like cats and dogs as well. And so I just want to kind of close that. I think it's unclear right now what the impact to the agriculture in the state's going to be. But Jim Johnson did do some analysis for us and looked at the fire boundaries, and really looked at what ag land is zoned within those fire boundaries. And all told, as of last week, it is 58,000 acres zoned for agricultural use within the various fire boundaries. Now, we don't know the impact on cropland, on grazing land, on infrastructure, on livestock, any of that yet. And that's going to take some time as people are able to go home and go back into their evacuation zones. But that's kind of the initial look that we've been able to do to date. ODA doesn't necessarily have any disaster type programs, but our federal partners at USDA do. And so we're working really closely with them to make sure that the information that's available is getting out to our ag community. One of the programs that they have in the immediate is a livestock indemnity program. So if people had livestock losses, they can claim a reimbursement to be a portion of the value of those. And so we've been pushing out information, and immediately the most important thing is documenting your losses and making sure our ag community who might have been affected are getting that information. Also, we've been looking at starting some conversations around soil erosion. Obviously, as we're going into the fall, that's a big concern, as we've had, over 1 million acres already burn in the state. And so we've created a really short 2-pager on soil erosion after wildfire, some best practices, things to think about, and then working with some of our other state agencies, ODOT, OWEB, and others about what we should be doing. Are there federal resources to help in the kind of short, immediate term, but then longer term as we look to landscape recovery? I think I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. I'm just really proud of our staff and how they've stepped up over the past 2 weeks, really dropping almost everything to focus on this, even the folks who were directly impacted, who had to evacuate, and it affected a lot of our agency, all the way down to our IT staff who, worked through the weekend so we could get this database and animal tracker up and live. So I'm just really proud of ODA staff really pulling together through a pretty hectic time. And we're going to be, this is going to be a long-term recovery for many of these in the ag community, and we're looking, just to see however we can be helpful there.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Are there any questions or comments for the director?
Stephanie, I have a question. Barbara.
Okay, Barbara Boyer.
The soil erosion 2-pager. Carla, can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, we can get that to you, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I'll just make one comment. I live in an urban area, and we just happen to have the last Riding Academy and Hunt Club. It's in the National Historic Register, and they actually took 50 horses in. So it really affected people, even in urban areas. We had 4 or 5 fires, I think, in Clackamas County. Maybe we still have some burning. I think we may. Okay, any additional comments, questions on this agenda item? If not, yes, Director
Chair
Taylor.
Halleck, yeah, just one thing I forgot I should mention. We actually stood up a wildfire page where all of the resources that we're creating, we also created a paper about caring for livestock after a wildfire, because, just like humans who, if they breathe in smoke, right, signs to look for, those types of things, and we're putting all of that information there, as well as that soil erosion 2-pager. And but we'll share that directly, but we'll also include the link to that wildfire resource page, because we'll continue to put new information as we get it up there too.
Great. Okay, the next agenda item is a budget update from Lisa Hansen and Lauren Henderson. I'm not sure if they are yet online and if there's going to be any screen sharing. So Carla, are you there? Are Lisa and Lauren there? I will just sit here quietly and see if somebody says something.
Yes, Lisa is on the line, and I will share the budget reduction page that was posted and shared with the board.
Great, thanks, Carla. For the record, Lisa Hansen, Deputy Director with the Department of Agriculture. Good morning, Chair Halleck, members of the board. I'm going to just do a little brief reminder about where we're at in terms of the current biennium. I think when we talked probably in June, the department had done a lot of early work recognizing that the COVID pandemic was likely going to create an economic downturn and we would see some budget ramifications because of it. That said, if you remember, we had talked about this is probably the first time, at least in my history in state government, where we've seen both the downturn in the general fund because of the economy being shut down and a downturn in our lottery funds as well because of bars and restaurants, et cetera, being closed. And so on the lottery fund side of things, let's talk about that first for the current biennium because it's the simplest. Lottery funds really is a matter of cash flow. It comes to the agency on a quarterly basis. based on an allotment process. And so when the bars and restaurants closed down, we took some pretty early action to cut our lottery fund expenditures for the summer of 2020 and moving forward. We were in the midst of our Japanese beetle eradication and we needed to finish that work. But what we did do on the lottery fund side is we really limited the amount of seasonals that we brought back to do our insect surveys, as well as we pivoted our noxious weed staff into our hemp program. And that provided us a great deal of savings and really was beneficial to the agency. So that's lottery fund, just in a short place for the current biennium. On the general fund side, I think when we talked the last time, we were working on a couple of processes. One for the governor's office, putting together a list in case the governor had to do reductions directly to the agency by allotment in terms of general fund, but also being prepared for the legislature to come in and make adjustments in the general fund budget. Ultimately, there was a second special session in early August. And so the document that you have in front of you really outlines the reductions that ODA took to our budget for the current biennium on the general fund side of things. We took about a 9.7% reduction in our general fund for the entire biennium. And so many of the savings that are listed, we've talked about previously. We held positions vacant where we had one-time money. Some of those are gone. If we had any vacancy savings, those were taken as well. We reduced our CAFO staff by an FTE, but we were able to move that person over into our fertilizer program where we had a vacancy and funding available for that. As I move down, I'm looking real quick because I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time on this. We did a lot of fund shifting as well, from general funds to other funds or general fund to federal funds where those fund shifts were available. We also took a reduction in the farm to school infrastructure grants. That was about half of that was reduced. The Oregon Invasive Species Council, in which new money had come into them, they had planned on putting out some grants as well as putting some money into an emergency fund. That was reduced as well. Moving quickly down, there was some new money that came into the department for our laboratory, about $600,000. That was taken in these reductions, as well as some new money that came in for our predator control program, about $200,000 that was taken. And then the Department of Education also had a reduction in their farm to school money that's available for the remainder of the current biennium. You have the entire list in front of you. We've been fortunate to date. We've been able to accommodate the reductions that have been put forth without having to do any layoffs. We've really prioritized our staff, our long-term permanent staff, and trying to find ways to move people around into other work and maintain their employment. So that's the quick summary of the current biennium. I'll pause there and see if Director Taylor or Lauren have anything that they want to add, or Andrea Boyer from our financial and budget shop is also online, and she has done just a tremendous amount of work all along, keeping things updated and helping us work through all the budget process and the reductions that we've been working on. I would also just mention to you, I think the entire exec staff, the program directors, have been really involved over the last several months. We've been meeting weekly around budget, and the team has really come together and leaned into trying to make decisions for the agency as a whole, and not necessarily trying to think outside of the normal programmatic silos, and and done a lot of collaborative work around what you see in front of you. Any questions? Any additions?
I actually have a question, but I wanted to see if Director Taylor or Lauren had anything to add. Alexis is shaking her head no. Lauren, I can't see you.
I do not.
Okay, thanks. My question is, it's the hit from the Department of Education on the Farm to School grant program, and then combined with the ODA reduction. Is there anything left in that program? And was the rationale is it because of COVID, kids aren't going to school, so they don't need the program? It just seems like it was a huge hit. And I would be curious what happened to the program.
I think Lauren will respond directly. There is still funding left, and I know there were additional challenges put on that program with COVID, with just trying to meet the need of feeding kids in a different way than they would if they would have been in school. But I'll let him talk more specifically to it.
So, Chair Halleck, I believe, and this is off the top of my head, as a reminder, we have a staff person in our marketing program that is a farm to school staff. That cut does not affect that. We still have that. That's Amy. The farm to school in the Department of Education, I believe they received $15 million total last biennium, and so this would have reduced that number. So it did not eliminate that program. That program is still active. And I'm assuming the Department of Education, along with their other cuts, probably didn't have a lot of choice but to take something out of that program. And I'm sure there will be lots of discussions in the session coming up about that program and the level of funding that it has. I don't know, you might know that Speaker Kotek and Representative Clem have been very strong advocates for increasing the funding in that. So I'm sure that cut will be revisited.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Any other questions from board members? Okay, I'm hearing none, which means that we could move into the second budget item, which is the 2021-23 agency request.
So while we were in the process of working through budget reductions for the current biennium, we were also in the process of developing our agency request budget for next biennium. Ultimately, our budget request was due September 1st, and we met that deadline. If you look at the documents, you see, the agency request budget has a great deal of growth in it. We continued through this process putting everything forward that we had talked about early on. That said, I think to get just a sense of reality for what we're looking at for next biennium's budget, the numbers that we're hearing today are expecting somewhere in the range of a 17% reduction in terms of general fund based on revenues. I think that may fluctuate some, but I would say generally our agency request budget for the new things that we have asked for, if it's in general fund or lottery fund, there's going to be a tremendous amount of scrutiny, and I'm not overly optimistic right now. I would also say that I think as we look at the budget, as an agency, our goal is to hold programs as whole as we possibly can, given the uncertainty that's out there and the budget climate that we appear to be facing. So I think we've prioritized our requests as much as we can to some key issues. Although I don't think this has our packages today in that order. I don't, Chair Halleck, is there a reason for me to go through the packages with all of you, or you have them on the documents. Are there any specifically that you all have questions about? And that might help us move along, because I think the other thing we really need to talk about is what we have on reduction lists that we were required to put forward, and just to prepare people for what that might look like.
Thank you, Lisa. I think because there's a lot of material in the document, in the interest of time, I think we'll just pause right here and let people ask any questions about specific packages. Of course, I will have a question. But before I have a question, does anybody else on the board want to ask a question about the document before Lisa proceeds? Okay, so I have a couple of questions, Lisa. One is on the 17% reduction. Would that be from the 2021-23 current service level, or from the agency request budget, or from the legislatively adopted budget?
So right now, I think I may not have been clear. I think we're anticipating revenues to be off by that much. And so it's unclear what type of percentage reductions we'll see in agency budgets based on that, and trying to create a statewide balanced budget, as well as those numbers were put forward prior to the recent wildfires. The revenue forecast comes out this morning. I think Jonathan just reminded me it's going on right now, so we may have more of a picture coming forward for what it looks like. I think, Chair Halleck, I don't know that we have a good sense of what the full reductions will look like yet.
Okay, thank you. One other question I had was on package 270 related to animal health. A request for general fund as a fund shift from other fund. What was the other fund? And why is the fund shift needed?
I'm going to let Lauren respond to that.
The animal health program, particularly the lab, the other funds portion comes primarily from vet product registrations, but that fund also has to support the state vet's office as well. The laboratory is like our regulatory lab. They can't charge enough fees for their lab tests and still be somewhat competitive, and so we try to balance those laboratory costs with the private sector as well. And we've talked to the private sector about, is our lab still needed for those tests? And I think that's an ongoing discussion. But the other funds comes from sample costs as well as the vet product registrations fee. But the vet product registration fee has to cover quite a few things. And so it's putting the core part of the lab back on general fund on the infrastructure piece so that the laboratory costs can stay reasonable and competitive.
And what happens if you don't get it?
We will have to look very seriously at closing that lab.
Okay, thank you. I had one more question, and I can't, if you don't know off the top of your head, I'll find it, because I can't find where I saw this. It was either in the program reports or in one of these packages. Some program is requesting a 30% fee increase. Does that ring a bell?
It would be our food safety program.
Okay,
and
so I was curious if there's industry support for that.
That would be a challenge for us right now. So part of the reason for such a large fee increase is that program had a significant fund shift in the current biennium that drew down its fund balance. And so in order to maintain the program, we either need an influx of general fund to help hold the program whole, or we need a very large fee increase. I think staff have continued to work with the industry to move them along in that discussion. I don't think we have consensus around that fee yet. I mean, I think the industry will likely continue to push to ask for a general fund restoration. So we have kind of dueling packages in our budget to try and maintain a full food safety program.
And the same question that I asked Lauren, what happens if you don't get it?
So I'm going to answer this question pretty generally. I think given and not knowing what the economic forecast was as we speak, there will be lots of discussions at both the state executive level and the legislature about we don't have enough money to fund all of these programs. The economy is probably not going to support large fee increases like the one you mentioned. What is the core work that needs to get done? And some choices are going to have to be made. Bottom line, if we don't get general fund back in our food safety program, or a combination of that fee increase at up to that 30% level, something there, we will have to look at what is the core work of that program and make some hard choices in that program. I think you could say that almost every one of our programs that have a combination of funding. And I just say that particular fee increase should not be a surprise. Director Taylor, Deputy Director Hansen, and myself have testified in the last one with charts showing this is the effect of taking the general fund out of this program. This fund balance, although today it looks good, it takes us forever to save the money, and it seems to go away overnight. And that chart looks pretty bad into the dirt at some point in time. It just can't keep up. And so I'll just leave it there. I think at that time we were talking about a potential 20% increase. And just to add an important point to this, our food safety program has been a vital part of our pandemic response.
Yep.
And so that program, we didn't foresee a pandemic coming, obviously, but I don't know how our agency would have been able to do what we need to do for the food stability in our state without our staff being able to work with our food processors and our farms.
Thank you, Lauren. I don't have any more questions. Does anybody else on the board have questions or comments on what we were just talking about or anything else before they move on with their presentation? Okay, Lisa and Lauren, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so let's move on then to the detailed reduction list. Some of you may remember that by law, as part of our agency request budget, we have to do a 10% reduction list for each fund type in our budget. So general fund, lottery fund, federal funds, and other funds. The list that you have before you is what the agency has worked on putting forward in that area. I think we have done what we can to take any of the reductions that we took during the current biennium that we could roll forward. You'll see those included in this list. There was a lot of new money, though, in the current biennium reductions that we weren't able to use. They were one-time funds on the list. So we've been looking very closely beyond just the list that you see here at any vacancies that are coming up in the agency, considering how to do that work. Should we do it differently? Should those vacancies be refilled? And along with that, with having this reduction list in front of you, we're continuing to look at our org chart as well, just knowing that we are anticipating some pretty big budget impacts based on what's going on in the economy and what people are foreseeing in terms of the legislative reality for the next session. So on the general fund side of things, a couple of things to run you through. So at the top of the list, we would propose to keep our procurement position vacant for the entire biennium. We would propose to keep that CAFO position vacant that for the remainder of the biennium. And probably one of the topics of the most discussion would be the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership, which is a program that's carried out in conjunction with the Department of Environmental Quality. It's funded half general fund, half other funds coming from the pesticide fees. This is a pretty expensive program. It's based on doing a lot of monitoring and lab work at DEQ. And that ends up in our first 5% reduction on this list. Moving down the list, we have some additional reductions. So in our market access program, there's some fund shifting that we would propose there between general fund, other funds, and federal funds, with some changes in duties in some of our staff. In the natural resource program area, there's a reduction, again, to the natural resource programs, and this is a vacancy savings. The shellfish program, a reduction there as well. There are lots of little parts and pieces as we try and make up the 10% in general fund, again, with a focus on trying to hold our core programs whole. There's a vacancy in our food safety program. It's a program manager position that we would propose to hold vacant. It's partially funded with general fund, partially funded with other funds. Fund shift in our animal health program from general fund to other fund. This is a small one that we can put on a grant that we have. Number 9 on this list, we've had a long-time partnership at the Food Innovation Center with Oregon State University. And we would propose vacating our space at the FIC for a rent savings of $250,000. With the pandemic, we found that we can do a lot of our work remotely with our staff and still carry out our services. And although this has been, we've talked about this a lot, and this is a very difficult reduction to take, it protects staff by vacating that space. And so that's in the second 5% on our general fund. Moving down the list, then you'll start to see some reoccurring reductions or fund shifts that we took in the current biennium to our insect pest prevention and management program, shifting staff from general fund to other funds. Those are either onto our weed control program or our nursery program in the plant program area. There are a couple reductions to our ag water quality program. These are around monitoring. And then another vacant position in our animal health program and food safety. We have a vacant office manager. We would propose to continue to hold that position vacant for the remainder of the biennium. And then finally, I think that gets us to the end of the 10% on general fund. We have another vacant position in food safety, another program manager that we would propose to hold vacant for the next biennium as well, to get us to 10%. So again, as we work through this, we've really focused on trying to do all we can for our core programs and protecting our permanent full-time staff. And if we've had the opportunity to put vacancy savings forward, we have. And you'll also see the reductions in some of those services and supplies that have been important to the agency, like monitoring, but with the kind of core values that we've put forward in keeping core services, we've focused on maintaining staff, and so having to take these type of reductions impacts those areas. So I'll pause there on general fund because I'm sure there are probably some questions or concerns. It's a tough list.
Thank you, Lisa. Anybody have any questions or comments on this? So Lisa, I have one question for you. The Pesticide Stewardship Partnership, is all of that revenue at ODA, or are there going to be, will you see a similar general fund reduction proposal in DEQ's budget?
There's a corresponding reduction at DEQ because the revenues are transferred from ODA to DEQ.
Okay.
So there is a corresponding reduction, especially to their laboratory.
And is this cut known in the community of people who support this program?
We've been really open about this as a reduction option. It was talked about even for the current biennium. We had held back on some spending around PSP to provide us cash savings if we had to come up with additional reductions. It wasn't taken for the current biennium, but I think people anticipate it coming forward. The other thing I would mention in this, I think there's been a lot of discussion with the community that has supported PSP around the structure of it and what that should look like. And so I think this will come as no surprise to people, but they will be disappointed, should the cut be taken.
Okay, and just one last question on that program. How come a decision was made to go with a full elimination instead of just a partial reduction?
That is a fair question. The numbers that we're talking about, Terhalic, are really tough to get to, and this is one of those places in terms of it's an expensive program with the sampling and testing, and in terms of our core services, this is above and beyond what we would consider core services.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the general fund reductions?
Sorry, if I could just add to that as well.
Sure.
One of the things we looked at was, you could reduce certain programs by every program by a little, but at some point, you might not have a program that is actually giving you the outcomes that you want and what you are expecting, right? And so reducing certain programs like this one by half, is that program really being effective for the dollars putting towards it? And I think that is the philosophy we used here as well. And again, to Lisa's point, the level of savings that we're potentially going to be looking at, or reductions that we're going to be looking at because of the state budget, it made more sense to us as we were trying to navigate that picture. I also want to say, just because we put something on a cut list does not mean we do not think it's important. But when you get into reductions, and you look at our budget on what we have for general fund and then for lottery fund, we don't really get a lot of dollars there, and you hit really important programs almost immediately when you have to put anything on a list for a reduction.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Director Taylor. Any other comments or questions on the general fund reductions before we go to lottery? Okay, Lisa, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so the lottery fund list at 10% is much shorter. We have a vacancy in our Soil and Water Conservation District program that we would continue to keep vacant, as well as a position in our water quality program that we would maintain a vacancy as well. And then we go into a reduction in our noxious weed control program, which would be a continuation of what we've been doing this biennium in terms of using we would reduce the work and then we would use staff in the hemp program. I think the reality on the lottery fund side, and I'm pretty comfortable saying this, we're not sure where the revenues are going to be on lottery, just like we weren't sure about them for the current biennium. And I fully anticipate discussions of, that we could see deeper reductions in this area depending on what the revenues look like as we move forward in the current biennium. So I think there's more to come with that. And for a reminder for all of you, our lottery funds come into this agency in the area of our plant program, IPPM, weed control, ag water quality are the big programs that are funded with lottery funds. So reductions in terms of lottery fund revenues hit us at the core of what we do on the natural resource side of things. So I'll pause there. Director Taylor, anything you want to add, Lauren? I feel like doom and gloom. It's been a hard couple months.
I'll just add one thing, and that is, I think we talked to you about this before. I don't have a crystal ball. I only have history as my guide. The state hasn't had, in my tenure, reductions of these magnitude of lottery and general fund at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know what the revenue forecast is saying today. I think it's maybe better than people thought. That's a good thing. I just remind the board that the lottery funds, if anything's going to bounce, it's probably the lottery funds as people resume their lives as best as they can with the pandemic and then the wildfires. However, history tells us that they oftentimes, even though lottery is constitutionally dedicated to those natural resource programs, that the decision makers may look to those lottery funds for general fund programs that would fit into those lottery funds to see if they can be funded off of those funds. And so I only say that because I've had people lately say, well, if lottery goes back to the way it was, everything's normal. I would caution people to think all about that, because it has been looked to help the general fund programs that fit those constitutional requirements before. I don't know that. All I said is I have history as my guide. And so we hope, obviously, none of the cuts take place, but we have to be prepared.
Well, I'm sure, Lauren, that cheered everybody up. So if there are no other questions on lottery, maybe we could move on to more good news with the federal funds.
So the next list actually is other funds. So these would be, fees for service, registration, license. No, that's okay. And what you'll see, and I don't know that going through this whole list is completely necessary unless you want me to. You'll see companion cuts in this list to things that were on the general fund side. If they had an other fund, we put those on the list to help us get there. Traditionally, the other funds piece on these lists, if they are program services that are fee for service, they really haven't been impacted much as we've done reductions. I don't have a good sense for if that's true, going forward, depending on how difficult this budget session is. But what you will see through most of this list is if there were general fund cuts like the pesticide stewardship partnership that's 50-50, on the other fund side, you have the other half of that. For those positions that are vacant in food safety that have a partial funding with general fund, you will see the remainder of that position on the other fund side here as a reduction on our list to help us get to our 10%. There are other reductions in terms of other fund programs that are strictly other funds, like the Weights and Measures program. It's down, I think, on number 6 on this list. We have a program director that'll be retiring at the end of the year. We would propose to keep that position vacant next biennium to help us get to the reduction levels that we need to for this exercise. So rather than going through the whole list, I think I would pause there and see if there's anything in terms of specific questions you all have.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions? I've got just a couple. Lisa, I would assume most of these other funds are fees. Is that correct?
That's correct. Fees and licenses.
Okay.
So,
and go ahead.
So, I mean, just for a couple of new board members, inspection fees, like in our shipping point inspection program, those are other funds. Our nursery licenses, those are other funds. Our licenses for scales and motor fuel dispensers, those are other funds. Registrations for pesticides and fertilizer, those are other funds. So food safety licenses for grocery stores and food processors, those are other funds.
Thank you for that explanation. And then a related question are any of them in statute? Would there have to be statutory changes on any of them? And if you don't know the answer to that right now, you can just let me know later. I'm just curious.
So the general answer is for the items on this list, is there a statutory change? I don't think so. In terms of the fees that are charged, some of them are in statute, some of them are in rule. It's a mix for all of them. That said, there also is, and we've seen this before in economic downturns where the legislature has used a notwithstanding clause, which has allowed them to take funds from a program and move it to the general fund when there have been economic downturns. And those have been known in the past. And you maybe remember these, Chair Halleck, as fund sweeps. And so there's a combination of things that could happen on the other fund side of things.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the other fund piece before Lisa moves to the federal fund? Okay, Lisa.
And then on the federal fund side of things, really these are dollars that we typically get in grants from the federal government. This is much like putting together the list on the other fund side of things. If the grants are available, I think and there is not a matching requirement, I think this list is more of an exercise generally than it is a cut list like we would see on general fund or lottery. And so again, I'm not going to run through the whole thing unless you all have a desire to do that. Our regulatory lab could be implicated. Our ag marketing program, one of the things that is on there is, potentially a cut in the specialty crop block grant program if we had to do a reduction, potentially some impact to the Oregon Invasive Species Council, and then also the wolf compensation program are part of those. But typically what we've seen, if there is not the requirement for a state match in terms of dollars, we've been successful in maintaining those federal funds.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions on the federal fund reductions? I have just one request, I guess. If, as Lauren said, these are unprecedented times, and if it looks like it's going to be any worse than what you have presented here today, the director referred to the decision on the pesticide reductions and the issue of core mission and core programs. I think it would be helpful for the board to revisit what are considered to be the core mission and core programs if we're actually going to get into a budget situation where decisions are going to have to be made to cut whole programs. I hope it doesn't get that bad, but as Lauren said, they are unprecedented times, and it really might be worth it for us to have a overall more clear picture of that. If you get down to the bare bones here, what are we looking at potentially?
So what may be a good thing for us to do at the next board meeting is to bring our prioritized program list back to the board. It's been a while, I think, since we've gone through that with all of you, to just talk through all of the programs and how they're funded and the funding types and how they've been ranked. And we surely could do that.
I think that would be helpful if the other board members agree, because everything you hear is pretty dire, and we may be looking at more cuts like that. Any objection to doing that?
I have a question here, Luisa.
Go ahead, Luisa.
Yeah. I would like to know in the budget section about the invasive species, the funds are only federal funds to support this program?
So the Oregon Invasive Species Council in the current biennium had lottery funds. It had some general fund, although that was removed. And then it has limitation for federal funds. I think we do have a little bit of federal funds coming in from the Forest Service that we just signed an agreement for. There are state dollars, though, in it, but this is one of the places where there is, I think, excess limitation for the program. And if the council were to be successful in going out and getting a grant, there's a process in which we can ask for permission to go get limitation from the legislature for it.
Lisa,
so
can you please explain what limitation is?
Sure. So in the case of general fund, dollars and limitation are equal. Limitation is the authority to spend the money. In the case of lottery funds, limitation is the ability to spend the money, but we've had to talk about we're managing the cash because we don't have cash necessarily for how much we've had authority to spend. And so we've had to manage it like our checkbook. The same is true if you're looking at other funds and federal funds. The legislature will give us authority to spend up to an amount. That's the limitation. But we may or may not have the cash available through grants or through the program fees for all of that authority. Does that make sense?
Luisa, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I think it's hard to understand some of the things, but I think I got my answer. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any other questions? We're coming up on time for our next agenda item. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Thank you, Lauren and Lisa, for delivering all that good news for us today. And our next agenda item, Carla, I don't know if there's any setup. I believe we have a guest, Kathy McDonald from the Oregon Global Warming Commission, is going to provide an overview of the Commission's plan for developing a goal for the natural and working lands. Welcome, Kathy, if you are with us.
Kathy, are you on the line?
It's just 9:45, so
So I see her on, but Kathy, if you're talking, we cannot hear you.
Yeah. I don't know if you have a text number for her or something. These are the joys of doing meetings virtually. Carla, excuse me, Carla, are you doing some magic?
It looks like Stephanie's gonna try to reach out to her. I talked to her this morning and she was going to try to join earlier to be ready.
Does, if she is unable to join, is Stephanie Page going to give this presentation, or are we just not going to have it at the meeting?
So I think she's on. I see Catherine McDonald there.
Okay.
I think having audio problems. So maybe do you want to move the break early and take a break now?
We will move that. Is she there? Kathy, did you make it? If we do that, if we take a break now, we then have public comment at 10, so she wouldn't be actually on until after public comment. So I'm fine with doing that as long as she's aware that her presentation will be delayed. Okay, I'm not hearing any option to do anything else, so I think we will take our break now and we will reconvene at 10 o'clock for our public comment, and then we will have this presentation following that. So the meeting is adjourned until 10, I guess is the way I do that. Thank you. Don't forget to mute your mics.
Okay, hi Carla. Call into the number. Okay, great. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, bye.
Hi, Kathy, are you there?
She's just hung up from me, and she's gonna. She was on her computer and she was able to hear us, but it sounds like her input sound wasn't working. And then when she tried to call by phone, there was that echo that we heard. So she's gonna try just calling the phone number.
Okay.
And see if we're able to hear her that way.
Okay. Is she gonna do that now, you think?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I bet that's her. Is that you, Kathy? Hello, Kathy?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hooray.
Yes. And then let me make sure I can see you. Yes. Okay. I still haven't figured out how to turn my camera on, but that's okay. And then when do you think you'll be done with public comment?
10:15, is that right, Carla?
It should be around 10:15, yes.
Okay. Great. I will make sure I'm on at 10:15.
Great, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the problem. Bye.
It's 10 o'clock, everybody, so if you're within shouting distance, please get back on. I'm obviously going to have to crack the whip a little bit harder since we're not getting people back together again on time. I'll get out my ruler for knuckle wrapping virtually. I'm hoping that we have Michelle, Samantha Berger, and Amy Wong on somewhere.
Yes, it looks like they're all online.
And when I reopen the meeting, Carla, would you reiterate the instructions for public comment? And do you need to start the tape again? Okay, so I think go ahead and start the tape.
Okay.
Okay, I will reconvene the September 23rd board meeting for our public comment period. We received written comments from the following individuals and organizations, which in considering the resolutions in the work group, you probably should have already talked about this. We received written comment from Sherry Amaviska on resolution 310, Kelly Peterson on resolution 275, Jefferson County Farm Bureau on resolution 310, 1,000 Friends of Oregon on resolution 310, Mike McCarthy on resolution 310, the Oregon Farm Bureau on resolutions 29, 155, and 310, the Dyke, and I am probably pronouncing it DUYCK Family Farm on resolution 310, the Oregon Agritourism Partnership on resolution 310, and SEDCOR on resolution 310. And we have 3 folks signed up to provide public testimony today. 2, I believe, are on resolution 275 and 1 on resolution 310. So Carla, could you give them their instructions, please?
Yes, good morning. We will go in this order: Michelle Blake, Samantha Bruger, and then Amy Wong. Each of you will have 3 minutes to give your remarks, and when we get you on the line here, we'll start with Michelle, and I will call out time completed at the end of the 3-minute mark. So Michelle, if you're available and ready to go.
I am available, thank you. Chair Myers, member of the board. My name is Michelle Blake. I live in Salem. I'm the Western Region Coordinator for the Mountain Lion Foundation. ODFW's Cougar Management Plan relies on recreational hunting and lethal target area removals, but the best available science demonstrates that this approach actually increases the risk to livestock. Some of the best research on this comes out of the Northwest, specifically in Washington and British Columbia, and this is research that undergoes a stringent peer review process to prove that it is sound science, and these results are supported in numerous other peer-reviewed studies. We cite those studies in the written comments that you received on HSUS letterhead, but signed by our organization among many others. The way to protect Oregon livestock from depredation is to employ non-lethal measures to prevent conflict in the first place, and then where conflict does occur, to manage it in a way that targets the individual cougar involved and not indiscriminately killing cougars that are not involved. We ask that you amend your resolution to encourage ODFW to employ these best practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I believe Carla said that Samantha is our next person speaking.
Hi, yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, thank you, Chair Myers and members of the board. My name is Samantha Bruger, and I am with the organization Wild Earth Guardians, and I'm based out of Salem, Oregon. Today, I'd like to ask you to withdraw your Cougar Plan Resolution number 275. The Oregon Department of Agriculture's mission is to ensure healthy natural resources, environment, and economy for Oregonians now and in the future. Inspection and certification, regulation, and promotion of agriculture and food. I am concerned that this resolution is beyond the scope of the Board of Agriculture's own mission, just as I'm sure you would not want wildlife experts issuing sweeping resolutions regarding crop regulations. It feels out of step to have the Agriculture Board do so with wildlife policy. My hope is that the board will remain focused on its own mission and continue to serve Oregonians by, as your vision states, through maintaining and enhancing a healthy natural resource base and strong economy in rural and urban communities across the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Samantha. All right, I think our third person is Amy Wong. Is she with us today?
Good morning. This is Amy Wong with Friends of Family Farmers. Can you hear me? Because my camera isn't working.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. So as I said, I'm with Friends of Family Farmers, also known as FOF. Thank you for having me today to comment on Resolution 310 regarding agritourism. FOF is respectfully asking that the State Board of Agriculture not adopt Resolution 310 in its current form. FOF's Executive Director, Sherry Sirkin, is a member of the steering committee of the Oregon Agritourism Work Group, and she believes that the Board of Agriculture should allow more time to work with a set of key stakeholders to review and amend the resolution. Like many things, this work has been interrupted by COVID-19 and fires, and FOF would like additional time to create clarity in statute and administrative rule related to agritourism across Oregon. FOF is concerned that the draft resolution does not address a number of issues that farmers who wish to incorporate agritourism into their businesses are facing today, and that more work needs to be done to fully recognize the value and benefits that agritourism can bring. As such, FOF urges the board not to adopt the agritourism resolution in its current form in order to allow more time for members of the Oregon Agritourism Work Group and other relevant organizations, agencies, and businesses to provide additional feedback and input. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Amy. Carla, I believe that closes the public comment. We do not have anybody else signed up to provide comments at this time. So, and is there anything since we started that we should do differently?
No, that's who we have signed up, and we should be able to close that agenda item.
Okay, so we will close public comment and we will return to the agenda item that was originally scheduled for 9:45. I believe we now have figured out the technical difficulties, and we have Kathy McDonald of the Global Warming Commission with us virtually to do a presentation. At least I hope so. Are you there, Kathy? Katie, I'm sorry. Katie or Kathy, or no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Never mind, it's Kathy.
We tested our connection during the break, so.
And I just texted her, so.
We might be a little early.
I just texted her to make sure she was ready.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Excellent. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulty. It is, as you said, the joys of presenting and having virtual meetings. I really want to thank Director and Commission members for you taking some time to hear from me today, and also want to really thank the members of your staff that have been engaged in helping the Oregon Global Warming Commission work through the commitments and directives that we've given as part of Executive Order 20-04. And I thought I would just first touch on kind of why it's important to think about the land sector when we think about climate change. I want to thank the Commission, the Board of Agriculture for adopting a climate resolution last year. I really appreciate seeing that. But I thought I would give you a little background on why I think it's important to think about the land sector, then a little bit about the Commission and our charge as it relates to natural and working lands, and then quickly outline the process that we've identified and the products that we're hoping to deliver to the governor next June. And by way of introduction, I'm the new chair of the Global Warming Commission. My first meeting as the chair was in June. In my day job, I work for the Nature Conservancy, and I oversee our natural climate solutions work in North America. And in that, so I'm kind of wearing a little bit of both hats as I speak to you today, but primarily the Global Warming Commission chair hat. So next slide, please. So a little bit about why it's important. Sure that all of this is not new to you all, but certainly the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change really advises that we need to achieve net zero emissions on or before 2050. And so because some areas of our economy it's going to be very hard to completely eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, it's important to think about what we can do with natural and working lands as part of a carbon capture strategy as we think about our future. Natural and working lands today in the U.S. offset about 11% of U.S. emissions, or reduce overall U.S. emissions by 11%. And we've done some work at the Nature Conservancy to look at the potential for additional contributions from the land sector. And we've estimated that we could increase the current performance of the land sector by 18%, or almost tripling the current role of the land sector in reducing overall emissions. I think one of the great things for agriculture is a lot of the practices that have been shown to have promise, like cover crops and nutrient management, avoided grassland conversion, silvopasture, and manure management. They have other benefits for agriculture, and some of the practices not only reduce emissions, but increase sequestration while also kind of increasing soil moisture holding capacity, farm productivity, and value. So there's, I think, a lot of potential upside if we can design effective programs for increasing carbon stores in agricultural lands in Oregon. Next slide, please. I guess the other point I'll make is, just as we've seen so tragically this year, we need to pay attention to the land sector because it can be a source or a sink. And we need to be thinking about not only how to increase sequestration, but reduce emissions from the land sector going forward, because the atmosphere, doesn't make distinguishing characteristics about one type of emissions over another. Just a little bit about the commission. We were set up in 2007 as part of our statutes set by the legislature. One of the responsibilities that we have was to look at carbon sequestration potential of Oregon forests. And the commission did try to look at what the Oregon forest could contribute around 2010, and I think at the time it wasn't clear that there wasn't enough information to really do a good job of trying to come up with what that might look like. The commission picked that charge back up in around 2016 and did a carbon report working with the U.S. Forest Service and some folks from OSU and others to evaluate the FIA data that's collected for forests across Oregon. And we did put out a report, which has been followed up on by the Board of Forest, or the Department of Forestry, and some work that they did to kind of improve some of the documentation around forest carbon. Next slide, please. In Executive Order 20-04, the governor, can I have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry. Well, you can leave it here, and I'll just describe it. So in Executive Order 20-04, the commission was charged with developing a recommendation for the governor on the role of natural and working lands in Oregon and what we might propose as a goal for emissions reductions and increased sequestration in natural and working lands. And so that charge was given to the commission with the direction to work in coordination with the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the Oregon Department of Forestry and Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. And we have been meeting, a small technical team has had several meetings to try and outline what the process looks like. We developed this set of recommendations to the commission, and we took that up in our July meeting, and the commission has kind of signed off on this as the scope of work that we will attempt to deliver next June. And so we see it as a kind of a 6-step process, and we are planning for some stakeholder engagement across all 6 of those steps. First, pulling together a team to identify what existing inventory data that we have, and we have begun to do that. Then identifying priority improvements to our current inventory, and I appreciate the request that the department has submitted, and Board of Agriculture have submitted for additional funds to better inventory agricultural soils, to better understand the potential, the current and potential of soils, and hopeful that you may be able to get that that funding from the legislature this next year to help us improve our inventory as it relates to agricultural lands. Then there are a number of decisions that need to be made about how we will build out the land sector emissions and sequestration estimates. So there are good directions from IPCC that are used by the EPA for the national numbers. Those need to be modified slightly when you're looking at it at the state level across all of the emissions that the state looks at, but also some decisions that we need to make here in Oregon about how we can best think about the land sector inventory emissions and opportunities for increased sequestration. We need to develop a baseline and a business as usual projection, then identify potential policies, programs, and practices that we could advance to improve performance over that business as usual baseline, And then finally, develop a recommendation and for a goal and a process for including natural and working lands in Oregon's climate mitigation plan. So those are the steps we've identified. Now I'll turn a little bit to the stakeholder engagement. Next slide, please. We're doing outreach to commissions and boards, as is this meeting today, tribes. We've been in touch with technical experts on carbon accounting. As part of my day job, I'm a member of the U.S. Climate Alliance Impact Partnership, and we are tasked with helping Alliance states identify kind of best practices for inventories and accounting, and we had a great presentation yesterday from World Resources Institute, who's developed a really helpful technical resource for states who are thinking about how to go about carbon accounting and inventories. So that's one group of experts. I've been in touch with a gentleman from Oregon State University that I believe the department is working with on some of the soil inventory work. And then there are a number of others. The American Farmland Trust has put together some tools that they are about to announce that work with the NRCS COMMET information, but can provide estimates of current rates of practice adoption and potential rates of increased practice adoption that I think will be helpful. So that's kind of some of the work that we're doing right now, is trying to assemble all of these experts who can provide some additional assistance. And then we want to reach out in particular to the technical assistance practice providers, the soil and water conservation districts and watershed councils, because we feel they're going to be play a critical role in any programs that are developed for advancing natural climate solutions on agricultural lands. And then obviously we want to get input from landowners about what practices and programs they would like to see, what kinds of ways that we should be thinking about designing those programs so they work best for landowners. We also will be reaching out to environmental justice, land use, environmental conservation, and climate advocates who are all interested in thinking about how the land sector can contribute to our overall climate work. Next slide, please. We have kind of a rough timeline of meeting with tribes, boards, and commissions this month and next month. We hope to do a webinar later this month, or probably at this point in October, to kind of explain what the executive order charge is all about, and to help start to engage stakeholders in that process. We're going to be developing a survey and putting one or more surveys and putting those out to get broad input. And then we'll be synthesizing what we hear from stakeholders, hopefully circling back to boards and commissions with some of that information as we continue to work on the technical aspects of our recommendations, and hope to have the Oregon Global Warming Commission review a draft proposal around February, and then try and get that out for public review in March to bring it back in and synthesize the information and get a recommendation to the governor. These are all tentative dates. As you can imagine, we are all trying to kind of work through all the things that life is throwing at us right now. And so some of the timelines may shift a little bit, but this is kind of our hope as to how we're going to move forward. With that, I'll close and answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy, very much. Board members, do you have any questions for Kathy? I can't tell too much who's on with us. Oh, there's Barbara. Okay. Any questions from anybody?
And also any recommendations, if you have any, for how we engage people.
Questions or recommendations? I have a couple, of course. You may have said this at the beginning, but how is the commission funded?
The commission is supported by the Oregon Department of Energy. We have a portion of a position at ODO that supports us, and then we get a lot of assistance from DEQ. Our main charge is to develop a set of recommendations that go to the legislature and the governor every other year, and so that's kind of our main duty. And we carry that out through our commission meetings, and then with the staff support that we have at the Oregon Department of Energy, and a little extra time for me.
Great, thank you. And a question for Director Taylor. What is, or for both of you, what is ODA's role going to be, and in terms of providing information or staff and any potential resource demands on ODA for participation in this?
Yeah, we would be looking to ODA to help us engage agricultural stakeholders, helping us identify who we should be reaching out to, helping us think about the questions we should be asking. We would love to continue to have participation on the technical work, the technical group, to kind of help us think about the technical aspects of the work. We do anticipate that we will get a lot of support from others to help us think about that as well. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to put together a pretty good team of people that can assist the commission and the department think through some of the important questions associated with agricultural lands and how we think about developing a goal and recommendation. The department has already been involved through the U.S. Climate Alliance. We've been hosting learning labs that get all the states in the alliance together, and each state is able to send a team of people. And when we were able to meet in person, and the department was represented both by Stephanie and Judith at some of those meetings, the alliance is getting feedback, is continuing to have virtual learning lab sessions like the one that I mentioned earlier that the World Resources Institute helped to provide. And so the department will be continuing to be welcome to participate in that. So those are the kinds of things that we're hoping for.
Thank you. Director Taylor, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Chair Halleck. So, in the executive order, we were one of the agencies directly named to work with the commission as they build their report on natural and working land. So we're certainly very engaged in that process. Also part of that executive order, we were one of the agencies who also had to do a climate report, which we shared with the board. One of that, in that climate report, we mentioned a couple things that I think are really pertinent here. One, just our support and the work that we plan to do tied to the commission's work on this goal setting. And we're also, we didn't talk much about it today, but we did at the last board meeting, the POP around doing that baseline soils work, which Kathy did mention. That is one of our POPs. I know we just had a not so great discussion around where the state budget is, but I think that is a really important piece for us in Oregon to really understand those unique soil types and some of the carbon sequestration that might be available there based upon all the different types of soil that we have in the state as well. And we've been actively engaged, and we expect to continue to be actively engaged. Judith has been one of our lead points, and then obviously Stephanie is also extremely engaged through just all of our climate work here at ODA.
Thank you very much. And one other question or comment, Kathy, Dean Sams from Oregon State is on our board, and I'm just wondering if, in terms of data gathering or anything, if you have a connection with Oregon State on any of this work.
I reached out, and I apologize, I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, to, I think the person that you've been working with on the POP, correct, Dr. Kleber, is the person that I reached out to, and he seems very interested in helping the state think about that. I also wanted to acknowledge up front that I'm really pleased to say that the commission now has an agricultural representative on the commission. It had been a vacant position for quite some time, but I'm very pleased that Tom Reitman, who is the owner-operator of Reitman Ranch, is now on the commission representing agriculture. So I want to make sure to raise that to your, so you are aware of that connection.
Thank you. Do any other board members have comments or questions? We're sort of at the end of our time, but want to be sure that anybody or recommendations.
Stephanie,
Hi, Stephanie. This
Marty
is
Myers.
go.
Okay, so I'll take Marty first and then Barbara.
Morning, Kathy. How are you?
Hi, Marty. Good to hear you.
What type of outreach and input are you going to get from the federal side regarding, I mean, our forests are, we have a big ownership of the federal government in our forests. What type of outreach and input are you getting from them and funding potentially?
Yeah, great question. So as I mentioned, the Forest Service, the Pacific Northwest Research Station has been very involved in the Board of Forestry and Department's work on our forest carbon assessment. I've also reached out to the connection that Oregon has on the Forest Service side with Chad Davis, who is the liaison on shared stewardship with the Forest Service and ODF. And then NRCS has been also very helpful over the last couple of years in helping the state think about natural and working lands, and they are committed to continue to engage.
So forest management and wildfire prevention is on the table in this discussion?
Yeah, it will definitely be something we'll have to think through as we think about what kind of a recommendation to make. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Barbara?
Barbara Boyer for the record. Kathy, this is my second time seeing this presentation. I saw it, I sit on the OWEB board, so I saw it at that time too, and appreciate the work the commission is doing. There's a very active group of agriculture people in the Valley that feel that agriculture is being targeted for the climate shift that we're having right now. So I'm really pleased to see the commission identifying the good that agriculture is doing and the partnership, the potential partnership with NRCS about increased carbon options. So I just wanted to make that comment. And my other comment is when you do the survey, will you include the Board of Ag members in that survey email list? I'm sure Director Taylor will, but I just wanted to put that out there as a recommendation.
Great, thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And it's, I think there's, it's really unfortunate that that there's been that view among some people about agriculture being part of the problem and not part of the solution, because I definitely see it as part of the solution.
Okay, do any other board members have any comments or questions? I believe the name of the person at Oregon State is Marcus Kleber. Is that correct?
It's Marcus Kleber. This is Alan Sams from Oregon State. Marcus Kleber. And I believe that John Talbot has been involved with some of the planning that ODA is doing, as if I recall. We had, in terms of the planning there. One suggestion you had mentioned an emphasis on, I can't remember the practice. I can't remember what the full line said on the slide, but you had mentioned the soil conservation districts, et cetera. I think it's kind of an outreach kind of thing. That extension would be a really important asset to include in them.
Absolutely, good point. Thank you.
Okay, any other board members have any comments, questions, or recommendations? Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was very informative. It's the first time I've heard it, although Barbara's gotten 2 chances, but we really appreciate you coming, Kathy.
Thank you very much. Look forward to staying in touch with the board as we develop out the recommendations.
Okay, we are moving into our board business, and because I think we all need a little bit of an uplift, I think if he's available, we're going to start with Lauren, because during our last few minutes, a revenue forecast came in, and thank you to everyone who emailed it to me. So we have some good news. Lauren, are you there? If not, we can okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not an economist, so I'm reading it just like you all can. But in summary, it is way better than what they were looking at in June. And what does way better mean? Remember, the economists have only the data that's in front of them at the time. And if you all remember June, everything was falling off right and left. I think just generally looking at the materials, the federal stimulus worked in Oregon. Remember the pay protection program and helping to keep employees employed? Because one of the things that they were forecasting was up to a 20% unemployment rate. They now know in reality it's actually 12 or 14, which is still horrible, but it's not 20. And so bottom line is the state revenue projections from income tax and corporate are still pretty close to the trend line that they had pre-pandemic, and that's really good news. I think what they'll be watching going forward is this. One, I think this biennium is not as bad, and the reductions that maybe were planned for may not need to happen, some of them, in the way that they thought. Even if they take the reductions, those dollars go back into the general fund and can be used for next biennium, which helps. They were forecasting in June about a $4 billion deficit. It looks like the revenue forecast has given back about 1.7 of that deficit, which is good news. 2, I don't know, this recession, remember what it was caused by. Oregon's other recessions typically are based on economic structural problems. This one was caused by, for lack of a better word, a natural disaster in the form of pandemic. And so does Oregon recover out of that quicker and more methodical than maybe those economic ones? Right now, the data is suggesting that Oregon might recover out of the pandemic at a different path than those structural economic recessions that we have to go through, like in the early 2000s and 2008. So they'll be watching that. The optimistic view is that Oregon's employment recovery will be well on its way and growth in 2022. 23. The last recession, it took Oregon almost a decade to climb out of those issues. And so I think there's probably a lot of surprise out of that. It's still not great. It's not good. We know that the real test is how many of those businesses that were affected, how many hang on and can stay in business, and how do we lose? And if those that are unemployed, where do they go? And so lacking any more federal dollars, I think there will be a lot of work in Oregon on the unemployment rate. Does it continue to go down or not? But generally, I I think people are feeling way better today. The next revenue forecast, I think in November, will tell us a lot. Lottery funds look like they've bounced back almost back to normal for the most part. And so if that hangs on, the charts show that they're going to hang on. You know, the unknowns is the winter and kind of what happens there, and now the impact of the wildfires. But I'm thinking for this biennium, it's a lot better. And the state's in a better spot right now with their emergency funds and those things to kind of ride this one out if it behaves more like a natural disaster than the others. And so we'll all have to wait and see on that. But generally more positive than I think people thought, certainly in June.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren. Does anybody have any questions for Lauren? Okay, we appreciate it very much. We could use some good news. So on the board business, that before we get into the OWEB and the resolutions, I have been communicating with, well, I communicated with all of you, and then with Carla. I think we should add to the board business an opportunity for board members to comment on these written program reports that the staff take the time and care to present for us. And so I would like to provide time today to do that. If anybody has any comments or questions, as will come as no surprise, I do. But before we get into it, does anybody else have any comments or questions? And I would just like to thank the staff for the time that they take to prepare these for us, since we're not doing a lot of full-on program presentations like we used to do. Any comments or questions from any board members? Okay.
I do. Barbara Boyer does. But see, I think because this wasn't on the radar of some of the program leads radar, I don't know if anybody can answer some of my questions because I don't think they're all on the phone. I had one, let's see, where is it? Under food safety. Is Isaac on the phone?
He is.
So Isaac, this is for you. You're talking about the food processing playbook. And let's see, the agency responding to COVID-19 cases identified in food processing establishments. You write that as of this writing, over 265 firms have received COVID-19 consultations. Do you, can you equate that to people? How many people received consultations? I mean, is this trainings within food establishments? I guess I'm trying to figure out what that consultation looks like.
Sure. Yeah, I can help explain that. So COVID consultation is a process that was developed out of the need to make sure that responses from counties were consistent when we had COVID positive individuals or employees in a food processing firm, so that those processing establishments weren't forced to close unnecessarily, and that they have appropriate mitigation measures in place to prevent further spread. And so through working with OHA as well as Oregon OSHA to develop the process that we would jointly follow and engage with on that, we developed the toolkit. And that toolkit is a document for those businesses to use, best practices really. And so our staff are going out anytime that a firm is identified to have a single employee who is positive with COVID, reported through OHA, through that whole system. It comes back to us, and we engage with that food processing firm to meet with them and walk through what they have in place. So total number of people, it's hard to say. The businesses vary in size that we've engaged with, but it's anytime there's a single individual that is positive in that establishment, we go out and engage and walk through those steps with them.
And if I could add, also, we are doing it as people request it. So they also might, we have done some businesses that have not had a positive, but they want to make sure that they have done all of the steps that proactively. And so we're also offering that service And we've developed a similar process for on-farm as well. And so we're doing this on-farm as well. Another thing I would say is this is a very unique approach that we have developed, and we've actually gotten a lot of national attention from FDA and from other states on this process. And I think it's been really effective in, again, kind of managing. The goal is to protect worker health, but also ensure we have a stable food supply in these businesses that are critical to keep, food and grocery stores shelved.
Yeah, and I do believe that 230 number that's listed in the report may also include some on-farm visits that we have done. That's the total from the spreadsheet that we're working from. So that's a combination. It's been the majority of the visits have been with food establishments, but some farms.
This is Marty Myers. Barbara, we did have a visit from ODA, OHA, and to our farming operation because we did make the list. But it was, when I got the announcement that they were going to visit, I was apprehensive, but going through the process, it was consultative and very helpful. And I think we also got acknowledged that we had best practices set up. So it's a good program. I stand by how they're administering it. So good job, Isaac.
Thanks, Marty. I appreciate that. And that Marty does bring up a very good point that I should have mentioned, that these are truly consultations. This is not a regulatory inspection. They are voluntary. So if we give you the call and we say, hey, we noticed you got a positive, we'd like to come help you evaluate your mitigation measures. They say, no, we've got it. We were working with, X, Y, and Z, or what have you. They can certainly decline the visit. We have had very few people decline on the food processing side. I think there's a little more hesitancy on the farm side.
Barbara, do you have any more questions on the report from anybody, for anybody? Okay. Isaac, as long as you're there, I have a question. Well, I have one. I just wanted, on behalf of the board, I wanted to recognize the service of Dr. Brad Leemaster, who retired at the end of June 30th as the state veterinarian. It seems like he had a long and illustrious career, and so the board just wants to acknowledge his service and thank him. I think my other question, Director Taylor might have addressed this earlier when she was talking about animal rescue, but on your item on licensing of animal rescue facilities, there was a Senate bill. So this is apparently getting moved into the office of the state veterinarian. My question is from where and how is it being paid for?
Sure. So yeah, Senate Bill 883 moved the enforcing agency to the state veterinarian's office. Previously, it was delegated to each individual county to take on this. Part of the reason that 883 came to pass was that there was inconsistent enforcement across the various counties, and so they put it under the state veterinarian's office to have a consistent approach across all counties. The program is entirely other funded from the fees from the animal rescue entities. There was some general fund dollars allocated for the initial startup of the program to do the rulemaking and get the licensees in place and then carry the program forward on other funds.
Okay, thank you. Do any other board members, in addition to me, have any other questions on the report for any of the program managers? And also, Barbara, just in response to your comment, I gave the program managers a heads up that we were going to put this on this agenda item, so hopefully they could all participate. So I will try and be brief. So I have a question for Jason on his report. My first question is, it says as of 9/11/20, the Weights and Measures delinquent caseload stands at 114 licenses worth $176,000 of license fee revenue. What does that mean? Are you going to catch up with those licenses, or is this a resource issue? What does that mean? I think he's on there. Jason, are you still with us? Maybe he's not still with us.
I see his name, Jason. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Did you hear my question?
Okay. Yeah, I did. So that stat means that the license is still active, but we have yet to collect the fee. So that originally was closer to, I think, like 280,000 once as of July 1st, which is our renewal period. So our 20 field inspectors will go out into the field. They've already done a great job knocking it down, and right now I think it's closer to 150. But they will go out and collect those late fees to the point where in past years we've gotten down close to zero, but I think the last couple of years we've gotten down to like 5,000 or 10,000 still delinquent. So they're actively collecting those right now.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my other question for you is on your metrology lab and motor fuel quality program. I just have a clarification. I'm presuming your asterisks figured in parentheses are the 2019, and those are comparison figures. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's see here. Are you the Wolf Grant program?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, I have an easy one for you. What does the category missing mean?
The Wolf Grant allows for that type of claim to be filed, and it's basically if a rancher is in a area of known wolf activity designated by ODFW, they send out maps every December, and that your historic loss is greater than it has been prior to the presence of wolves, and you can rule out all other losses. You can actually apply for missing livestock claim as a result of wolf activity. Okay. And the individual county advisory committees will review all that historic information and make a determination whether or not they allow that claim.
Okay, great, thank you. You're off the hook.
You bet. Okay, thanks.
So, Jess, market access is going to be pretty easy. My question for you is, in the second bullet, you refer to ODA's modest investment to assist Oregon farmers market. What was the modest investment?
It's Jess Paulson for the record. We reallocated I think it was about $20,000 towards seafood and $10,000 or $15,000 towards the farmers market in order to assist them with their expansion of online opportunities when the markets were closed early in the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. And I had another question, but it's already been answered about the farm to market program. I was just curious. I heard something on I guess probably OPB about they're still trying to figure out the impacts of smoke on the wine harvest. Have you heard anything about that? Anything further about that? I heard they were saying it could go either way. Some were predicting that it was going to be fine, and I think Director Taylor has a comment about that.
Yeah, so we have been talking extensively with the wine industry with the concern about smoke. Folks might remember, I think it was last year or the year before, with some of our Southern Oregon wineries or vineyards got canceled contracts from California with concerns over what they call smoke taint. And since obviously the entire wine growing region, more or less in our state, I know we have some, I think, wine activities going up in the Milton Freewater area as well, and other parts up there. But really, our whole state was under smoke and concerns about what that meant so close to harvest with those grapes. There is a test that you can do, and I think with us, Washington, California, the labs that do that work are pretty over capacity. And so I know the industry has been working really closely with OSU because they have a smoke taint research project going on there to adapt one of their labs to be able to try and help with getting that done. One of the interesting things is, in order to be able to claim a failed crop through federal crop insurance, you actually have to have a smoke taint test. And so it's this balancing act between, do you put all the investment in to harvest it, to go to crush, and then on the hopes that your test, which right now the existing labs are really backed up, in a month comes back that your grapes were okay? Or is there a way to try to get that test right now so you can figure out that balance sheet? I'm sure probably Tyson can also talk more about this, but it is a concern that we are hearing a lot from our wine industry and trying to figure out how we can try and be supportive of that. I think very real concern right now of the unknown impact. Some grapes may be impacted, some may not.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Dean Sams, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Alan Sams, OSU. I just wanted to add to that in response to that backlog that Director Taylor mentioned, we stood up or greatly increased the capacity of our testing, and working with the wine board and the Wine Growers Association, and are turning samples around in a day or two. And they provided some funding to test all the major regions as a kind of an industry survey, and that will be information that goes to them to disseminate to their members, but also doing vineyard by vineyard and winery by winery fee for service kind of testing because of that backlog, and that will be an ongoing service that we provide because there's a limited capacity for that in times of crisis like this.
Thank you for that. Barbara, did you have a comment?
Yes, on the smoke, I have two things on smoke. I actually know of 3 vineyards who are abandoning harvest this year because they don't want to risk the potential of going through all the efforts and not having it be up to their expectations. 1 medium-sized vineyard and 2 small ones. So that was pretty shocking to hear. But also on the smoke management, Jess. So this is your first year taking on the program. And I think burning season, field burning season would have happened right around these fires. Had that impacted the amount of acres you could get processed?
This is Jess Paulson for the record. Yes, Ms. Breyer, the number of acres that we're able to do is significantly reduced this year compared to previous years because of the smoke. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me though.
Okay, Tyson, did you want to? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Alexis. Sorry, I just want to add on that. Since the limited field burning that we do have in the Silverton Hills and the Willamette Valley is an important part of making sure the land, those fine fescue fields, as I understand it, they need that thermal sterilization as part of their growing cycle. And so I think it's really unclear right now on what the long-term impact of those fields might be. And we are in, very close discussions with the seed industry on what options are available on removing that biomass, on markets for that biomass for those growers, because that the grass seed itself has been harvested, but they have all that biomass on the field that they normally burn off that they're not going to be able to. And, the industry has come together and understanding all of the additional pressures this year with this unprecedented wildfire season, and really kudos to them to say that they are not going to burn the rest of the year. But there are real concerns, I think, for next crop year and the crop year after and what that impact can be. And so we're in really close conversations with them to see how we can try to be supportive and what is there to try and help them, because they won't have a crop year failure this year, but they might, that longer term is unclear at this point.
Thank you. And Tyson, did you want to add anything? Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
Follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up. So the fields that are not getting burnt, I'm assuming they paid permit fees?
Yes, they did.
And if they're not getting burnt, is there a process of what that looks like? Is there a refund policy, or is it carry over into the next year?
So this is Lisa. Go ahead, Alexis. You're probably going to say what I was going to say, so go for it.
So that is one of the things that we're talking about. How can we, it is obviously extremely extenuating circumstances, what we have all experienced because of these wildfires. And that is one of the questions that the industry has posed to us. And we're looking at how best we can try and be able to support that request and what's the best way to try to do that.
Barbara, anything more? Okay, Tyson, did you want to add anything on the wine grape thing from your perspective?
Tyson Raymond, not particularly. I haven't heard about concerns about smoke taint out here. I mean, it's been as smoky as anywhere, but the one way that it has impacted some of the harvests out here is just concern for the health and safety of the crews that are out there. We've shut down harvest. I think we lost maybe 3 days last week because of the particulate numbers and they just didn't think it was safe to be out there. So I haven't. Kate hasn't said anything about concerns over the finished product outside of harvest being delayed beyond what was perfect for the harvest. But I haven't heard of any concerns about the end product and the taint situation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a comment on this topic? Okay, thank you very much, Jess. Stephanie, I have just a quick request for you. I noticed that there is a new CAFO MOU between ODA and DEQ that's going to the Environmental Quality Commission. I was wondering if our board could get a copy of that as well.
Absolutely, I'll make sure that you get a copy of the current working draft of the MOU, of the updated MOU.
Okay, and is it going, my understanding is that the EQC is going to approve it at their November meeting?
My current understanding is it's scheduled for consideration at the November meeting.
Okay. Do we have to approve that MOU as the Board of Ag? No, Alexis is saying no. Okay. Yeah, if you could provide that, that would be helpful. I have a question on the investigation of the compost contaminated with oh God.
Pyrrolid.
Thank you. And the other one.
Oh, great.
Is there much contamination, and how do consumers protect themselves? And I'm asking this very personally because I had compost blown on my property, and I called to ask them about this, and nobody ever answered my question. So.
I have a multi-part answer to that. We've been collaborating with other agencies that work with composters, including Metro and our colleagues in the solid waste program at DEQ, to do outreach to composters to promote more product testing and traceability. In a lot of ways, this was like trying to track down the source of of contamination, just as we would in several programs. So we've tried to look at some practices that other industries use in terms of traceability and product testing to help prevent the problem in the future. And then I think as a consumer, folks can ask the composter that they purchase from, or ask the supplier that they purchase from what kind of prevention practices they use, what kind of testing for residues is done. So that's one thing. Then I think another thing is if folks purchase compost, and I understand that this is a challenge, but you can conduct a test of the product in your own garden by planting. Peas are probably the easiest, but peas are very susceptible to those herbicides and looking for growth deformities. So that requires a lot of extra work on the part of the gardener and some planning ahead, because I think just like I would want to buy the product and be able to plant right into it. But that's really the safest way to prevent a problem, and what we've been recommending to people who want to make sure that their product is safe to use, or is okay to use and won't damage their plants, would be a better way to say that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions that I had for you. Just a comment on, there's a reference in here to LCDC, and we've talked a little bit about, we had thought about having a joint meeting with them. I don't know if that's going to be feasible. I don't know if you've had any further conversations, if anybody at ODA has, with them about having a joint meeting between their commission and our board. But given their budget situation, I just don't know. I haven't heard anything. Have you heard, Director Taylor?
I think, after we last talked, just in the virtual format, managing one board this way can be challenging. To try and get two together, I think could be very difficult. I think we could do maybe see about, depending on, I think DLCD or LCDC's meeting maybe this week even, right now, on their kind of priority agenda for next year. Maybe we could start with just a presentation from them to the board, so the board knows what might be coming up, particularly that could intersect with agriculture. And then that might be a longer term conversation about a joint meeting when we are maybe able to get together again. Okay.
And in the interest of time, I just have one question for Helmut. On the invasive species programs, you may have a comment about securing continuous funding. Is that federal or state or both?
It's mostly at the moment, obviously, state funding, because a lot of the pests that we are worried about, like Japanese beetle, are not funded by the federal government, and they rely totally on the state funding.
And was that on our budget cuts? I don't have it right at my.
We receive a lot of lottery fund to do our work looking for those invasive pests, but also, as you know, the Japanese beetle eradication part is totally lottery funded. And yes, there are, because of the lottery restrictions, lottery revenue restrictions, we are on the budget cut side.
Okay. And you were also on there for the cut on the Oregon Invasive Species Council, correct?
That's correct. So we had to make a decision. What is more important to us right now is have boots on the ground priorities eradicating the pests that we know of right now, like the Japanese beetle, and that's where we have to make a decision.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I have one last question that I don't know who it's for. It was under administration and special projects. It says the Food Security and Farm Worker Safety Program was launched in June to help farmers, et cetera, et cetera. Is that federal or state?
So that's one of the programs, this is Alexa Taylor for the record, that I had mentioned last time and again at the front end that program was still open. That is a program we stood up very quickly in response to Oregon OSHA's workers around farm work, or new temporary rules around farm workers, around housing, field sanitation, transportation, the face coverings that we expanded the program to cover. But that's a state program we stood up. We're administering it via OWEB and some of OWEB staff. And it's a reimbursement directly to producers who have additional expenses that they were paying actually on receipts. But it came from the Federal CARES Act dollars went to that program. And that was the entire program was $30 million. $16 million of it is that reimbursement for those categories to agricultural producers. Another $14 million was additional kind of mitigation measures, the quarantine fund. So farm workers were able to, if they needed to quarantine because of COVID, could get some wage relief, those types of things. So that's that large pot of money all came from the Federal CARES Act, and that this part is talking about the agricultural portion that that was dedicated.
Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any more questions on this, I realize we took time.
This is Barbara.
Yes, Barbara. Go ahead.
I have a quick question, follow-up question on that one, Director Taylor. So the $14 million, the mitigation and quarantine, is that strictly agriculture, or is that all industry?
I targeted those funds are targeted to the farm worker community, as I recall.
So the 14 million. Okay. And who's administering that?
So part of that was through a program that Oregon Health Authority has called the CPOP. It's the Community Partner Outreach Program, I believe. And so there was money that went through that program to our community-based organizations, our community partners on outreach, education material, making sure things are getting translated into appropriate languages. Some of that money went through, the quarantine fund ran through, I forget the exact, we can follow up on the exact program. I can't remember it, but it's, there was already a wage relief running through that. And so this was an additional program added on to that through a nonprofit, so through a partner. Yeah, so those are the big ones that I remember.
Okay, Barbara, are you still there, and do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you all for doing this. I think it's important. Staff puts a lot of time and energy into these reports, and I encourage everybody to read them, and I hope we'll have time on our future agendas to review them. So Barbara, can you give us a report from OWEB?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I will. I'll give a brief report. We had our OWEB meeting on the 9th of September, virtual, of course. One fact that I walked away with, since OWEB has gone virtual, and everything, all their updates are online. They've been forced to do online enhancements, which they're very thrilled about. I haven't seen the huge enhancements yet, but with those enhancements, they have a paper reduction of 90%.
Wow.
And I found that an amazing fact. So, and then I saw the same presentation at OWEB that I saw today with the Climate Commission. And then the board has been offered this DEI training at the end of October, which I will take advantage of. We had a choice between 3 different days. So I will give an update on that after I take it, so for our December board meeting. And as you can imagine, it was all budget, and how we're going to shift our grant cycles to meet some of the reductions. So that was all I had. Alexis, did I miss anything from the OWEB meeting?
All right, do we have any questions? Okay, thank you, Barbara. We'll move into the resolutions, and we'll start with Work Group A, Stephanie Page. And for those of you who haven't checked your email, Carla sent the results of the work group, both work groups from last night. So you might want to take a peek at that if you can. Master the technology to do two things at once. Anyway, Stephanie, please proceed.
Right. Stephanie Page, Department of Agriculture. Oh, thank you, Carla. So the work group looked at 5 updated resolutions last night. We got some feedback during the board's review of these resolutions in February that it would be helpful to have some more background information added to each one of them. And so my fellow program directors and I went back and did that with these. So we looked at the updated draft background language last night. And so for 2 of the resolutions that we looked at, the work group recommended approving those revisions as proposed. In other words, the additional background language as proposed. And that was for the Columbia River Water Reservation and the trade policy resolution. Regarding the resolution related to biofuels development in Oregon, Resolution 269, the work group discussed drafting additional wording for consideration in December. And that additional wording related to the low carbon fuel standard. So we'll have an updated draft to look at in December. With regard to the Cougar Management Plan resolution, the work group recommended moving that forward with a couple of technical corrections to the background language that is in there, and a couple technical corrections to other wording. So those technical corrections are to update the cougar population number to reflect a 2019 number provided by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and to clarify that that applies to all age classes of cougar, and then to switch the word overpopulation with the word predation. That is more technically correct. And then finally, the work group looked at a resolution related to the Native Plant Conservation Program. And so that one will also do a little more wording revisions on that and bring it back for consideration in December.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. I would entertain a motion for approval of Resolution 29 and Resolution 124.
For the record, this is Grant Kittamura. I make that motion.
Is there a second?
This is Marty Myers. I'll second that.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving Resolution 29 and Resolution 124, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any opposed? Okay, the 2 resolutions are approved. Okay, for Resolution 275, first of all, I'd like to thank the people who took the time to testify on this resolution. Carla, I'm wondering if it'd be appropriate to put that up on the screen if you have it. And is there any, well, first of all, I guess I would entertain a motion on this resolution. All right, I'm not hearing a motion. People need time to read it. Okay, so somebody help me out on Robert's Rules of Order here. If we don't have a motion, what do we do?
So this is Marty Myers. After listening to the public comment, I would recommend that we kick this back to the work group and come forward with a recommendation in December.
All right. Do you want to put that in the form of a motion?
I think that's why you're not receiving a motion to approve.
Okay, you're just making a comment. All right, are there any further comments or discussions after the testimony today from anyone?
Grant Kitamura for the record. I think it was brought up last night that we'd like to meet with ODFW and have them update us on their understanding and approach to this. Is my recollection right, guys?
That's correct, Grant. This is Marty Myers again.
We would like to hear some science from them.
Okay. Anybody else from the work group want to comment? If given that, it's what I'm hearing is that perhaps in December we could, if we have time on the agenda, we could have someone from ODFW come and talk to the board about their program, and we would table any action on this resolution until we hear that. Is that what I'm hearing? I can't see anybody.
Okay.
All right, Carla, does that work for you on your agenda for December? Stephanie Page, does that work for you?
This is Carla. Yes, I'll work with whatever can get scheduled in for that.
Are all the other board members we haven't heard from? I'm assuming your silence means you're okay with that. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Stephanie, I think you're concluded and we can go to work group B with Jim, or excuse me, Barbara and Jim.
All right, on. So we reviewed two resolutions, and the first one we reviewed was resolution number 155. The only thing, we really didn't change anything, we just added background. So, and this has been out for comment, and we received one comment from the Farm Bureau saying they support this resolution. So that's my talk on 155. Jim, did you want to add anything?
Not really, nothing much to add here. You're correct. This was a resolution that had an awful lot of background put into the resolution, which was segged out and then put into a background statement, and really just focused on the resolution itself being in the resolution. I would mention that we were going to change the title of this to Farm Tax Deferral and Urban Growth Boundaries as opposed to Board of Agriculture Exposition on. So.
Yes, and this is Stephanie. This is the title of this is Farm Tax Deferral and Urban Growth Boundaries, resolution number 155, and that came out in your original packet from Carla. So I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
I so move.
Is there a second?
Brian Harper, second.
Thank you both. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of passing resolution 155, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Thank you. Okay, the next resolution, Barbara and Jim, please.
Yep, so this is resolution number 310, which we received a lot of public comment on, written public comment. And our discussions last night, several people asked us to pause on this resolution And our recommendation is to not pause on it and not delay today's passing of it, for the reason that we can bring this back at any time. It is not a closed book once it's approved today. Anybody can ask us to bring it back up and discuss some of the issues that were brought up in the written comments. So some of the, we didn't really change any of the facts in this one. We just changed the flow of the background, and then we changed some of the language to change the tone a bit of some of the language. So in the resolution the updated resolution you got last night was we changed one of the whereases, we moved them around, and then we changed the language in the number 1 of the resolution. So Jim, and then we added statutes, actually statutes too, so people could actually look up the history of some of the facts that we were making in this resolution. Jim, did I have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add in the last background statement, you notice that HB 1055 is lined out. I did some research on that last night. HB 1055 has nothing to do with land use. It had to do with the Liquor Control Commission. I don't want to go there with a land use resolution, so I would suggest that just be lined out. That's why there's no statute there also. So.
Yeah, this is Stephanie. I would just like to make a clarifying comment. I don't know whether any of the commenters from public comment are still on, but I just want to be sure everybody understands that these statutory references are from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, that this is not a regulatory program for the Department of Agriculture. It's a land use program, and hence those references are for those statutes and rules at LCDC. So I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
I so move.
Is there a sec? Barbara Boyer moves. Is there a second?
Brian Harper, second.
Brian Harper seconds. Is there further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The resolution passes. Thank you all for your work. And Director Taylor, I think we are now moving on. That concludes the resolution discussion, and we're moving on to the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission appointments.
Take it you want me to do that. So I think we've done this once before. The board will recall that you appointed a slate of, I think it was, I'm blanking now, 4 members who are actively engaged in farming and ranching, and 1 person who has experience or expertise in agricultural water quality. We've had at least 1 member already come up, expire because they had to stagger the terms. So, and which you reappointed. We have 2 additional commission members to the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission coming up for the end of their first terms, and that is Woody Wolf, who is a rancher farmer and rancher from the Wallowa area, and then so one of those 4 agricultural actively engaged seats, and then Lois Loop, who was the person the board recommended for the person with background and expertise in the ag water quality program. Their first terms are ending, so the board has some options, which thank you, Carla, for pulling up that memo. You could recommend both for a second term, as we talked to OWEB, I think they've both been great commissioners and they would support them getting reappointed. And I think they're both interested in getting reappointed. Or you could go back out and try to do a solicitation and that conversation again before the December meeting so they could be appointed. Again, this is just a recommendation for those two individuals to go to OWEB to get appointed to the Oregon Agriculture Heritage Commission.
So Marty Myers, can I ask a question? Alexis, is there term limits on the appointments?
Yes, there is. Sorry, I thought someone else was trying to talk. They are 4-year terms and no more than 2 consecutive terms. Since they were all appointed for the initial round at the very first time, because it was a brand new commission, they had to stagger. And so this will technically be the second term if they're both reappointed. And so the last time they could get reappointed under this batch, if that makes sense.
So is there a motion? Or is the board ready to make a motion?
I'll move to reappoint Woody and Lois.
Actually, what we're doing is we're recommending to OWEB to reappoint.
That's my motion.
Barbara Boyer seconds.
Okay, it's been moved by Marty Myers and seconded by Barbara Boyer to recommend to OWEB that Woody Wolf and Lois Lute be reappointed. All in favor say, oh, excuse me, is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm assuming we still have a quorum, Carla. I hope so. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. And Carla will verify that we have a quorum to do that. We're on to newsletter topics and meeting dates. Newsletter topics.
Barbara Boyer. I'd like for us to highlight our presentation from the Climate Commission. And I might be calling it wrong. I guess it's the Climate Commission. Oregon Global Warming Commission, sorry. Sorry. I'd like to see that highlighted. And then one of my other highlights I'd like to see is, I'd really like to highlight the positive impact that ODA had on COVID-19 and the wildfires.
Okay, any other thoughts on what should be in the newsletter? Do we want anything on the budget? Tyson's nodding.
Yes.
Barbara's nodding. Okay.
One other thing I would like to, oh, sorry, Tyson, go ahead.
No, sorry, I had a mouth full of Doritos. Yeah, the budget, I think it would be important to kind of highlight some of the challenges that the department's going to have moving forward with the budgetary constraints and some, just so people, stakeholders, and other officials, I mean, most of the people in Salem understand it, but a lot of the stakeholders don't always make that leap into what the economy is doing and the level of service that could potentially directly affect them. So I think maybe just some 30,000 foot view would be helpful.
I'd also add on to that to say that I think I've been impressed with ODA's innovative approach to leveraging different parts of its organization to make the dollar go farther. So somehow working that in, I think, is really a notable thing, because I think it shows that they're making really good use out of their money.
Yeah, have something on the at least on the some we passed, and then maybe some note of on the what we're going to do on the Cougar one. Anything else we need for the newsletter? We didn't have a super full agenda, so.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add for the board to consider is, I know I briefly talked about the new brand launch, that it might be a good, another forum to get our new logo out there in front of the legislature if there would be support for that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Everybody okay with that?
Yes, I approve that. Yes, I was going to mention that. Yes.
Super. Okay, I know we're over time, which is my fault, but that's the way it is today. So meeting dates. The next one is December 1st through the 3rd. So Director Taylor, what's up? Or Carla, whoever's going to take this.
I'll start. I sent out a memo in your packet that had some proposed meeting dates just to facilitate this conversation to make it easier. I also pulled together some dates of upcoming events and things like that that we know about scheduled already for 2021 in case you need to consider any of that. And then also attached was the list of previous meeting dates and locations where we had met before. In previous meetings, I believe we had talked about moving the first quarter meeting from February into January, just because session will be starting and doing that a little bit sooner rather than in the middle of the session startup. And then the only other thing I'll note is that, likely we're going to be meeting in this virtual format for upcoming quarters. So I don't know if we need to pick a location certainly for the first and second quarter, but might want to consider a location for the third and fourth quarter, depending on what the status of large gatherings are.
So this is Alexis. Thanks for that, Carla. I would just add, so we kind of on the first two proposed dates for the first two quarters for the board to consider, mentioned kind of like virtual/Salem, because if we are able to meet in person, we always do those first ones in the Salem area because of session. And we may want to just leave it all virtual. And then if we are able, depending on when we're able to kind of get back together, we could decide that at the next meeting for the one going forward, and we should have enough time to plan.
So how do people feel about having a meeting December 1 through 3 and then having another meeting again at the end of January? Does that give anybody heartburn? Will we have enough to do? I mean, well, I assume we have a request, I know, for a panel in December. I'm not sure about agenda items after that.
So could we wait, Barbara Boyer, can we wait till March, or is that just too much into session? March or even April?
Director Taylor,
can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I heard you.
I'm sorry, I was trying to think about session in March. I'm trying to think about kind of budget presentations. Lisa, are you still on? I'd like your perspective if you are.
Yeah, I'm still here. I was thinking about it too. Typically, our budget presentation is early in session, so mid-February, early March. It seems to always kind of fall around that NASDA meeting time that we have to do some adjusting with. Not knowing that, I just kind of hold my breath. I mean, we could schedule it for that time, and if we have to move it and we're only in a half-day format, we have to move it. I mean, I don't know that that's the end of the world if you give notice.
Well, I'm thinking like the end of March too, not so much tight with February.
And I don't want us to be in a position of having meetings just to have meetings. I mean, I think, especially since we're doing it virtually and there will be a legislative session. So, you know, they would go with.
I'm sorry, Chair Halleck, I want to clarify. You do have to have 4 meetings a year. That's required by statute.
Right.
So we have to do it January, February, one of those
March.
3 months.
Yep.
This is Shantae.
I mean,
would the January meeting be at the end of January?
Your question was, could it be at the end of January? Is that right?
Or, I mean, is it at the, are we thinking that it would be at the end of January if we had a January meeting, or?
I think so.
I mean, I would be fine with that.
Okay.
I'm flexible, either January or March. Doesn't matter to me.
Well, if it's okay with the board, I think perhaps the director, and we should do whatever the director and staff feel works for them, given its legislative session.
So I think it's hard to know what legislative session is going to look like, and I think that's maybe why I'm pausing. It's so, who knows? Are they going to be meeting in public or in person? Are people in the public going to be allowed into the building? I think, and so I think it's just so many balls up in the air. And so end of January seems a safer bet, I would say. But if the board wants to really think about doing something in March, we could try. But I just am, there's just a lot of unknowns, I think, at this point. So I think end of January. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, if we meet at the end of January, then when is the next one proposed? How long of a gap would there be between that meeting and then the next meeting?
Carla, can you pull the memo up so people can just see even the date options that we could start talking about? The next one would be at kind of May, middle of May, beginning of June would be the proposal.
Which could still be in session. Oh, thank you. This is helpful.
Okay, so let's just start. That January 1920, people's thoughts about that. Does that work for folks?
Fine with me.
Yes.
Anyone it does not work for?
Sorry, Alexis, the 19th or 20th, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Works. It works for me.
Anybody that it does not work for? Okay.
Just don't let it slip to the 21st, please. I am conflict there. So the 19th or 20th are great. It's Marty.
Okay. And I presume we're again looking at potentially a work group meeting the day before and then a morning meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the schedule that I had proposed. And if necessary, beyond a half day, I thought we could do a full day on that second day if necessary. But yes, I scheduled or proposed the Tuesday, these are Tuesday, Wednesday dates, and the Tuesday evening for potential work groups or other business, and then a half to a full day on the second day.
Okay, so hearing no objection, I think we're going to tentatively go with the 19th and 20th for January. So moving to June, I would prefer to be myself on the earlier date, just because it will have been a while since we met, but I'm not going to fall on my sword over it. So that would be the 18th and 19th.
So let's start. Does the May 18, 19 not work for anyone?
Okay, we'll go with that. And then moving all the way to September, which will be, Tyson, that's our last meeting, if you're still there.
I'm here.
Do you care what date in September?
Yeah, September. We're really assuming these are going to still be virtual in September, because I was under the impression that this thing was just going to disappear before the election. So I'm operating under that assumption, and I think we should find a location for September.
Okay, so what dates do you prefer?
Actually, those I'm 28. Actually, it doesn't matter. I can make either one. Either one should work. 28th, 29th would be more safe for me.
Okay, anybody else have any conflicts with 28th, 29th?
I'll probably be harvesting, Brian Harper. Later into September we go. It's entirely possible. That could be a conflict.
Okay, so what does will Brian be chairing that meeting? Yeah, so we need to have a date that works for you, Brian. So maybe the earlier date.
Yeah, that would be preferred.
Okay. And then the last meeting of 2021, end of November, 1st of December, or the week after that, I guess. Any preferences anybody has? And we probably won't be going. So what I'm hearing is the September meeting is the one where we might be going somewhere.
Well, I think it's too early to tell on some of these, the September or the kind of the last meeting of the year. I think maybe come January or June's meeting or May's meeting, we will have a better assessment, and we may be meeting in person in September, but and at one of those meetings, we can pick where we want to go. There'll be enough time to plan, I think.
Okay. Any preferences for the last dates of the year?
All the same to me.
Okay. Anybody have any comment one way or the other? What do you want? Which ones do you prefer, Alexis? Does it matter?
No preference, whatever the board wants.
Okay. Let's see, we're doing September, middle. Why don't we do the December 7th and 8th?
I can't do the 8th.
Okay, let's do November 30th and December 1st.
That works for me.
Good.
Okay, Carla, do you need anything else from us?
So can you confirm what are the dates? Can you summarize again just to see if I have them?
I can't.
Carla, you're still muted.
Sorry. Yes, we selected January 19 and 20, May 18 and 19, September 14 and 15, and November 30 and December 1st.
Okay, and you'll get those out to everybody at some point.
Yes.
And can I make a quick suggestion? If we do work groups, can we do them a little earlier, like maybe 4 or 5 instead of 6? Since we're doing them for about an hour.
Sure, I can send out a doodle poll maybe to get a earlier time that might work for folks. I just stuck with the original schedule that we've had because they usually started between 5:30 and 6. So happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? Any other business from anybody? Sorry to keep you over. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.